Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have another banger of an episode lined up for you today. However, before we kick things off, I would love to encourage you to go to your favorite podcast engine of choice and hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. Now that we're well into the 400 episodes territory, we've got a great back catalog for you to check out as well. So go ahead and check out our back catalog of amazing episodes with some great guests like the one that I'm about to introduce to you today, Mr. Tanner HOLT. And he is both the e-com manager for Scale Media as well as the managing director and founder of Mach 7 Marketing. Welcome, Tanner, to the podcast. It's awesome to have you along for the ride today. And look, we've been trying to tee this up for a while, and our calendars clashed a little bit, but we finally were able to make it happen.
It's going to be a fun journey. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Now, you work specifically in the space of conversion rate optimization, and this is an area this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love having a podcast, because I get to have guests on as guest mentors for our Monday sessions. And oftentimes these guest mentors work in areas that I'm not a specialist in. It's not my area of expertise. It's not my area of niching down as part of my consultancy work. And conversion rate optimization is certainly one of those areas. And so that's why I wanted to get you on today as a guest mentor, because I think we're going to be able to cover, I know the general idea behind conversion rate optimization and what that leads to in terms of not only higher conversion rates, but also higher retention rates, because people have a better experience with your brand. And so therefore they tend to be stickier. They tend to stick with you longer. You create an opportunity where when you remarket to those existing customers, they actually want to hear from you because they have a great website experience. So I think that in some respects, CRO feels like a misnomer because it feels like it has such a narrow focus. But when we broaden the lens just a little bit, CRO can apply to so many different areas of the business. And in fact, I would argue that CRO has to reach outside just the digital channel experience, and it has to reach into things like catalog availability. It has to reach into areas like fulfillment and speed and performance and what that fulfillment experience is like. It has to reach into kind of all areas of the business, not just that digital interface where we're comparing a red button to a blue button or a multivariate test. And so it feels the modern CRO specialist has to have more strings to their bow than just a basic ABM testing capability. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree. I think you hit it right on the head. Is everyone thinks it's just, hey, what's our conversion rate? How many sales are we getting? But in reality, it's a culture. It's not a job. If you really think about it, even your operations manager is, in a way, a conversion rate optimization specialist. They're just focusing on what metric. It all depends on what metric they're looking for. So really for CRO, typically they're looking at that sale, the click-through rate, trying to get to the ad. But when you go through that customer journey, like in some of the past episodes you've had, you have to know that buyer's journey. And it's really figuring out, where are we focusing on in that journey? What's going to give us the most lift? Do we need to focus more on, like you said, retention? And will we get more bang for our buck there? Or do we need to get something more up in the awareness stage? For example, if you don't have people going to your product page, they're not going to be able to hit the add to cart. It doesn't matter what you do. Maybe you spend all your time focusing on, hey, we need more add to carts, when no, we just need to get people to get to the product. We're getting tons of people on our blog posts, or they're opening our emails, but they're not seeing the product. And so you really have to look at that journey, and it needs to be that culture.
And I think when I was still working brand side, and even when I consult with brands now, one of the areas where I think conversion rate optimization has the most impact that is not website related is in the customer service team. What does, both in terms of pre-sales and in terms of post-sales service, what does that look like? And my first career was working in hospitality, and I remember that I had a manager back in the day when I was working in restaurants as a waiter, as a server. I had one of my floor managers say to me, Jason, he goes, I actually love it when something goes wrong at one of your tables. Maybe we overcooked their steak, or maybe we took too long to get them their food, or we spilled something in their lap, heaven forbid, or something like that. He goes, I actually love it when something doesn't go exactly right at one of your tables. He said, so never be afraid to come and get me to help resolve an issue that you have with one of your tables. And here's why. He said, because when customers walk through our door, They have a 100% expectation that everything is going to go perfect. From the moment they sit down to the moment they leave, they expect everything to go right. So when it does go right, it doesn't stand out in their mind. Nothing stands out in their mind. We're totally non-memorable. He said, but if something goes wrong, and we deal with that better than any other restaurant they've ever been to in their life, then that is going to stand out in their mind as something memorable, that they had a fantastic experience even when things did not go as expected from the moment they walked through the door. And I've carried that with me, and that was from a very young age. That was in my early 20s, and I've carried that with me ever since to say, look, our customers expect perfection from us. And when they come to our website, or we ship something to them, or they get put through to customer service, whether it's via email, live chat, phone, whatever it might be, the reality is they've already come with an expectation of perfection. So sometimes, even when things don't go perfectly right, the way we handle those challenging situations can actually make us more sticky and make us stand out better in our customers' mind than our competitors, depending on how we handle those challenges.
No, you're exactly right. And that's where at Scale Media right now, we're combining. So I manage a team that are working on the day-to-day expertise and the experiments to increase that. But I'm starting to oversee consumer insights. We're looking at that data. We're looking at the product research. Because if someone says the serving size looks off, I'm using what should be a 30-day serving size and lasts for a month, but I'm using it. It takes me 2 months to get it. That person's not going to resubscribe. And your retention rate's going to go down because they have enough product. So those are all insights. Everything has to work together. Now you can have, and this is where it's important not to be siloed, is you can have one department go and find that out and fix it. But if it's not communicated that way on your website and you really don't stick that out to the consumer, it has to be obvious. You can't hide it in a detail, right? Or they're not going to see it. And that's the whole point of, I like to call it clarification optimization. You're clarifying and making it easy for that person to see.
The other thing I've heard, and I'd love to get your take on this, the other thing I've heard is that CRO is just as much about making sure that the brand delivers on its brand promises and commitments as it is trying to get somebody to click the either add to cart or the checkout or the buy now button, right? And so to me, it feels like this segment of marketing is focused very much on, first of all, identifying what the brand is promising to the customer. What are we telling the customer? What are we guaranteeing to them? What are we inferring to them? What are we implying to them that when they do business with us, this is the experience they're going to get? And are we living up to that standard for ourselves and for our customers? So it feels very much, it's a trust building exercise. It's a storytelling exercise. It's a commitment and character exercise. It's an empathy exercise. It feels like CRO is probably even more so about psychology and the feeling that our customers get from us than technical implementation of a specific test to achieve a specific outcome.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think entry level people, when they start hearing like your conversion rate specialists, it's, hey, I'm going to have buyer psychology. I'm going to worry about monkey brain. And hey, I need to get something so they don't get distracted on the way, or I need to use that to my advantage so they hit that add to cart button and complete the purchase. But as we start going through those tests, we realize, oh, this is a whole journey. Everything impacts. Especially the biggest thing that I've seen that most companies don't look at is they'll look particularly, I do a lot of audits on Fiverr for people, and they're just so worried about that completion rate that they actually, when I go through and I look at their analytics, they're running ads and sure they're getting sales. But when you look at the CAC versus the LTV ratio, it's completely off and they're just digging their own grave. CRO is just as big into that as it is getting that add to cart. If you aren't looking at your costs and your revenue and making sure they all add up, you can have the best service out there, but if you're not making any money to show it to people and they can really understand that value, then it doesn't matter if they hit the add to cart button. You have to know that full buyer psychology beforehand of, okay, what's that value that someone's, especially with like lead magnets. I can't tell you how many people, hey, I have this free lead magnet. No one's downloading it. We get so much free stuff slammed in our faces, it doesn't seem like it's valuable. But if you can show that value up front, like you said, delivering on that brand promise, we're bombarded by so many ads these days that it has to stand out. And people need that second or third touch base, just not to even be visible, but to build that trust, because there's so many scams out there these days. And if CRO isn't taking that acquisition effort or even that search effort and figuring out where they are in their buyer's journey, are they looking for free information? It doesn't do any good if I go to a plumber and they want to increase sales and their top blog post is 5 tips to easily install it yourself. That's not going to get the plumber to your door. Or even better yet is if I serve all the way here in Utah, but I'm getting everyone from New York, they're out of my geographic range. So there's so many factors that we have to look on to making sure we can fit what the consumer is looking for.
And do you think it's important for a brand to do CRO based on the acquisition channel, like independently, and say, look, okay, we've acquired, okay, this customer cohort came through Google Ads, this customer cohort came through a Meta ad, or this customer cohort came through maybe an Amazon ad, and we've got listings on Amazon, plus we've got our own D2C website. Maybe we're also selling through social, maybe selling through TikTok Shop, etc. It seems to me that we have to do CRO that is very channel specific, because the types of customer cohorts that we're going to attract through those channels may differ. And the way that they perform, the way that they interact with our website, the type of content that they expect when they arrive at our website might be different. It feels to me, whether, regardless of digital channel that we're actually transacting through, that we also have to be very cognizant of where we're actually going out and getting that customer from. How are we securing that customer? Is it from an ad? Is it from an email? Is it through an alternate transactional channel outside of our D2C website? Because it seems to me that the psychology of those buyers can differ by channel, because I think to myself, like, my psychology when I'm on Instagram is very different to my psychology when I'm on LinkedIn, or when I'm on an e-commerce website, or when I'm on Reddit. So I can only imagine that when I think about my buyer psychology, it's very different when I'm on Amazon versus when I'm on a D2C website, for example. So I can only imagine that I'm not alone in thinking that buyer psychology by cohort, by channel, by demographic, by all sorts of different metrics by which we measure the types of customers that we're courting, we need to start thinking about their individual needs based on those customer cohorts and segments. Otherwise, it feels like we're missing an opportunity to tailor that experience specifically for them.
Yeah, no, and you hit it right on the head, because what happens is, let's look, for example, Amazon, right? You don't have to overcome. Everyone trusts Amazon. You don't need to have those value buttons of, hey, fast shipping, where for a lot of sites, everything says, hey, free shipping after your first $50. No, that's an expectation now. So if you're having someone come to your website, you need to address that. Where on Amazon, you don't. You need to focus on the value and how you're different from another. Amazon's very different, because then we have other types of optimization. You have listing optimizations where it's all about keywords, and Amazon's a completely different beast than your regular Shopify. But even going back to your platform, it comes down to that medium, right? For example, I could have the same person who loves, we'll just take a fitness person, right? They love fitness. They're the same age, but one might be a reader, and you send them to a blog post, and that's great. But the other person's going to want it all in video. If you're running video ads and you send them to a text landing page, that's going to be a big turnoff, right? So we have to optimize these experiences and have them in really that omni-channel effort and hit them a little bit everywhere. And if that's not planned out, you can lose a lot of money, especially with how much you have to put into retargeting. Like I said, if you're not hitting that person with that right offer at the right time, it's just not going to sink. And that's where micro testing really, for me, has been the game changer in the industry, because knowing the right offer is almost more important, and nailing that offer correctly and making sure you're getting it to that person is more important than some clickbaity headline.
That's such an interesting point. That's one thing I never really thought of before. The type of creative that you put out there in the market is going to attract the type of customer that wants to see more of that type of creative. It sounds so simple, but I guess if I saw a text ad on, say, for example, Facebook, and then I click on that ad and it takes me to a page with a video, then that might not be congruent with the type of content I consume. Whereas if I watched a video on Facebook that was a promoted video and I click through on that, then I'm probably going to want to see more video. So it's probably, even in the feed, the type of content that I like to consume is probably the type of content I'm going to interact with and want more of. And so it feels we have to link the journey between the ad or the organic piece of content or whatever it might be. We have to link that journey to wherever we send them to next in the next step of the funnel, whether that's on our website or whether that's on our store on Amazon or our specific product page on Amazon, whatever it might be. We need to make sure that journey is consistent and seamless from the point of the very top of the funnel, from consideration all the way through to potentially adding that product to our cart and beyond.
Yep. And it's also just even important when we're thinking about our offers too. A lot of companies may have that established product. For example, for me, where I've done a lot of work on Fiverr, I thought everyone loved video audits, right? It turned out when I did some micro testing, everyone just wanted a checklist. so much more efficient. Instead of having to do a half-hour custom audit and give it away for free to people, I could just send them a checklist and it could be generic and I could save a lot of time. They're not going to know the difference, but look at how much time from an operations standpoint. Like I've optimized that time and that ROI. So really testing that offer is not just from a consumer aspect, but can be critical to the business as well, especially when you're adding supplemental services like nutritionists. Do they really want those? Does it add value to your product, or does it overshadow your main product offering? Could be a complete thing that you might have to look at as well.
And how much do you think that the things that a lot of brands, when they first start out, they don't really think about, they don't really pay too much attention to, but it feels like could massively impact conversion, retention, repurchasing, CLV, the customer lifetime value, things like the unboxing experience, right? And a lot of brands, they don't think about that. They don't think about the collateral inside the box. They don't think about how the product is going to get pulled out of the box. They don't think about it getting protected to where it doesn't get damaged. I have bought 3 different tables or desks. Two of them were entertainment units. One was an office desk off of Amazon. And all 3 were damaged in some way. And they all 3, inside their boxes, they had foam, they had plastic wrap, they had bubble wrap. But for some reason, despite all that, they still had some little corners got dinged and dented. One of the entertainment tables had a literal crack in the top. Now, I'm not going to send these back. It's too much of a hassle. I'd rather just live with the minor blemishes, and I'd rather just, as long as it's structurally going to be sound enough to hold up the TV, that's probably the primary focus of what I got it for. But I bought all 3 of those through Amazon, and those unboxing experiences from those vendors now have been poor because, sure, it looked wrapped securely and it looked safe and it looked protected, but when I opened it up, it was like my first initial gut reaction was, it's not perfect. It's got these little minor blemishes. They're not big enough for me to bother returning, but I probably won't buy off of that supplier again because they didn't put enough attention to detail in the packaging. It just wasn't, despite the efforts they went to, it wasn't safe enough. Or the carriers were so rough on the goods that the packaging just wasn't good enough. And so it feels to me like that unboxing experience is mission critical, even if the customer isn't so upset that they return the item, but you want it to be a positively memorable experience, not a negatively memorable one, right? And that's how many brands think about the unboxing experience. It feels like very few do.
Yeah. And I actually worked for a security company where we really focused in on this because we found out, and we had it labeled step 1, step 2, step 3, because it was a do-it-yourself installation. Now, the fun thing about this CRO journey, unlike supplements, you send something to someone where you have no idea if they're taking that supplement. But with the security system, you can say, oh, did they plug it in? Have they turned it on? And we were able to get these data points, and we were able to say, hey, if they don't plug it in within the first 24 hours of receiving it, they're going to return it in 30 days. So how do we make that experience better, seamless? Do we have an agent call them after? You don't want to be too burdensome, but you want to make sure that they get it. What's your tone? What's that copy on that call? Do they come across as a sales executive, or do they come across as a very nice customer service representative? Everything, like the devil is in the details, and you have to know those things to make sure it's a memorable experience. Because worst case, now you just didn't return it. But let's take the true worst case scenario. You got so mad, you left a 1-star review. Now that 1-star review, that's up on the shop page. Everyone's seeing it. Oh, do I really want to buy from there? So really looking at reviews is so important. We've done a lot of just looking at reviews, and sometimes we found, even if you had a 4-star or a 3.8, sometimes it was better not to show that you had it and let this person scroll down and read the copy first. Because if it's too high, it's unbelievable. It's fake.
Unbelievable. It's fake.
But even at a 3.8 or a 4.2, which might be good to most the average person and still acceptable, it'll lower them from saying, oh, it's not a 5 or a 4. There's all these little ranges, like pricing thresholds, price testing. But there's so many little things you have to be careful when you're testing prices, because that affects how much value not only am I going to spend for this, but how much value they're expecting to see. How fast am I going to get the results, living up to that brand promise? And that's where that CRO
it feels like CRO is as much of a mindset as it is a specific practice with a specific set of things. That it's not something that it feels like you can just memorize, okay, cool, these are the, sure, maybe you've got your checklist, for example, that you do via Fiverr, that here's 15 major things or major areas to have a look at and say, have we even thought about this? Have we even considered it? Have we even refined this? Have we even bought from ourselves like we were a customer to see what the experience was actually like? Or have we had a family member or a friend or someone else? Have we had someone buy from us and try to be as critical as humanly possible about that process and intentionally be overly critical, be a Karen or a Ken intentionally, right? To try to pull this out and try to really pull this process apart and be hypercritical, because you're going to get different cohorts of customers, right? You're going to get the customers like me that maybe, it's just not worth my hassle to send this back. But then you're going to get the customers that not only will send it back, but then they'll also leave the 0.5-star review, plus they'll put it out on their social media, plus they'll take photos and they'll send it to their friends on Slack and on WhatsApp and say, don't ever buy from this place because they're crap. You get a range. You get a range from people that are, it's a little bit of a mild disappointment. And then you get the other people that are like, man, I'm going to stand on the pulpit and I'm going to crucify this supplier or this brand and everything in between. And so it feels, if you're going to take a critical view of your services, by definition, you should probably try to take the most critical view possible, because by definition, if you can make them happy, then anybody else is even easier to make happy than the most critical customer.
Yeah, no. And I think the big thing is, again, going back to Fiverr, one of the biggest disclaimers I give is, hey, here's my best practices after 20 years looking at a neuro, like putting EEGs, eye tracking on people. But I also say, I'm confident in what I do, but you got to test it. You got to make data-driven decisions, because I've done it where I've taken something that works perfect. It can be in the same industry and I take it right to another site. I may have hit statistical significance on that other site, but on this other one, who knows? We're not in a vacuum. People forget that, hey, there's Black Swan events. I had someone just the other day saying, hey, yeah, 2 years ago, I was able to get 200, it only cost me $200 a lead. That was 2 years ago. You have inflation, you have different cycles here. There's so much that's changed. Even if your product or your ad hasn't changed, your buyer has different views. There's different ranges of competitors out there. We have to get that refresh. I think that's the biggest thing people look at, is they get tunnel vision. Like you said, like getting in there and getting out. Sometimes you have to take a break out to come back in, or you have to get that other part. And that's where user testing and heat mapping are really great. You can get a lot of data from A/B testing, but you got to do some user surveys. You got to look at some heat maps. And ultimately, in the day, you probably even got to do some focus groups, even though some of those are a little biased. And then one of my favorite things is you just have to look and connect the dots. Something that worked for Chewy.com, even though they sell pet supplies, might actually work for a supplement company where they have different experience. Their checkout, they have checkout really good. What can we change here? Or what is a real estate agent doing really good? How they're presenting might affect a waiter. There's always things that we can learn and optimize.
And how do you think about, you make a very good point, which is a lot of brands, they fire and forget everything in their business, right? They don't look at, we've evolved as a business, so therefore, obviously, our customer cohorts have evolved. And how important is it, do you think, to operationalize reaching out to customers that are existing customers, and maybe even segmenting them by, okay, past customers who haven't bought in the last 6 months, who haven't bought in the last 12 months, who haven't bought in the last 18 months, or whatever it might be, and then also break it down by purchase frequency of your regular customers who haven't churned yet. Say, okay, these customers buy every 3 months, every 6 months, every 12 months, whatever, and create a operationalized outreach program to where you say, okay, maybe it looks like something like, okay, my customer service team has an hour of downtime per day where they're twiddling their thumbs. They've dealt with all the inbound tickets. They're waiting to hear back from maybe a shipping company or whatever it might be to resolve some issues. So they've always got little pockets of downtime where things are a little bit quieter than normal. Maybe what we do is we operationalize during those times. We reach out, we literally phone call some of our customers that are in these different cohorts, and we have conversations with them. We say, look, we noticed you haven't bought from us in 12 months. We'd love to understand why. We'd love to understand if you found a better supplier, if you just don't need our goods anymore. We want to I always think that CRO oftentimes is mostly about scaling the unscalable. What are the things that we think we can't scale that we should be scaling that would actually move the biggest levers in our business if we actually did it? And there's always pockets of inefficiency in our business where we can start getting closer to our customer. I find that in the B2B world, this is common, where in the B2B world, you might have an assigned account manager or whatever, and so you're constantly having these conversations. Well, in the B2C and D2C world, it feels like 99% of communication is outbound, meaning we're pushing out emails, we're pushing out text messages, we're putting out push notifications on the browser. It feels like we're talking at our customers 99% of the time in the B2C and D2C world, as opposed to talking with them and having a two-way real-time conversation with them. And sure, some people in the follow-up, they'll request a review, or they'll request a testimonial, or they'll request an NPS. They'll send out an NPS review to get their response of how often would they recommend them and what's the likelihood of recommendation. And they're able to identify their detractors that way. But it feels like that literal phone, I can't remember a single brand, even ones that I've bought off very routinely and then maybe stopped buying from. I don't think I've ever gotten a phone call from a brand just saying, hey, we just wanted to have a chat with you. We're really grateful for your business. We're really thankful for how many times you bought with us, 3 times in the last year. We really appreciate that. We want to just know a little bit more about what your experience was with us. Is there any way we can make this experience better? Is there anything we can do with the unboxing experience to make it better? Just having a two-way conversation with customers. It feels like brands just don't do that enough. What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, I think in B2B, like you said, there's always that win-loss. And it's always good to have a third party do it. If you don't get the sale, have a third party come in and ask why, because they're going to be honest to a third party, or you incentivize them. Hey, here's that $20 gift card. That's why review sites are so popular. And you're right, it is about 90%. But I think we live more, especially with social media. People are expecting that conversation. Social media is one of those things where I sometimes don't want to call it social media because it's just everyone's on their platform talking and there's really no conversation. But that's how a business is going to stand out and that's how it's going to grow. To your point, it can't just be a one-time thing. We hear so much in business automate. Use that AI and we lose that human touch. Yes, use AI to simplify and leverage and grow faster. It's never going to replace that person completely. And especially even, that's what I like about Qualtrics, for example. I used to work there. That's all about that experience gap. Everything is just trying to fill that gap and running it on a regular occurrence. What happens when you do, let's say you get your CSAT scores and they were really low Q3. You may have had something, maybe there was a shipping interest. Maybe a good example at the gym I go to is sales are probably going to go down in the gym because they were redoing the floors. People didn't like that. To the average person, if they were just doing it once a year or 6 months, they're not going to know that. And then when they go and do floors at another gym, they're going to see that same thing over. So having some type of a live feedback loop or a listening post is what Qualtrics likes to call it. So you're constantly get it. There's definitely this, we have to look at quantitative data. We need that statistical significance, but there still needs to be that ear open for that live data that's coming in so you can make those changes. And that's really where Qualtrics has made all their money, is being able, they went from what used to be everyone thought as branded as a survey company just to get surveys to experience management, because they really got that idea of, hey, we need to have that conversation.
And I think that encompasses things like secret shoppers and secret shopper services and making sure that we're doing that on a regular basis. And in the case of the gym, maybe it's something as simple as we know we need to replace the floor, so we can't not do that because ultimately the net benefit to all of our membership is going to be good. But maybe for the 1 month that we're doing that floor work, maybe we cut everybody's membership cost in half so that we retain them, so that we say, hey, look, we recognize this is a disruption. We recognize it's a pain in the ass. We recognize that it's maybe difficult to get in, difficult to get out. Maybe you won't want to come for some of these days because there's dust or whatever it might be. We're going to try to minimize the impact, but we realize it's painful. So for this month that we're going to be doing this floor work, we're going to give you 50% credit on your membership for this month. Just something like that. Or we're going to give you a free personal training session, or we're going to do something to sweeten the deal to say, look, we recognize this is an imposition. We recognize this is an inconvenience, and we have empathy for you. We hear you. We know this is going to be painful. We want to make it right. We want to try to make it minimize the impact as much as we can for you. So it feels, if we boil this all down, it's being able to hone the empathy gene at the highest levels of the business, but then operationalize that empathy throughout every layer of the business and every single touch point of the business. And it feels like that's something that is easier. It sounds easy. Like when you say it fast, oh, we have empathy as a company. That's great. Maybe the founder is empathetic, or maybe the CXOs are empathetic, or maybe the board is empathetic. Maybe your director is empathetic. Maybe your marketing manager is empathetic. But how do we literally operationalize that across every single facet of our business? It feels like that is a much bigger challenge than it seems like on the surface.
Yep. I think that's where, when we come down to conversion rate optimization, it's really everything. It might even be in your employee experience. If your customer call agents don't enjoy their job, that's going to come across on the phone and that's going to reflect in your scores. Things go hand in hand. If we were to have to say as a CEO, if I was a CEO, you are really in charge of that experience management. I think Qualtrics has a really good term on that. They know all their different listening posts. But as a CEO, that's your job. And you're having people help you manage those different experiences. And your job is to identify those new ones and be able to react. And yes, you have to be able to make a profit on it. Because if you don't, then you can't provide the good service or the profit. We're in that capitalistic society. If you miss, they're going to find somewhere else to fit that need. Clayton Christensen is a great author of that. There's a hole in the wall, but you don't always need a drill to put it in. Sometimes you just need a hammer. And we have to gauge that. You're not going to win everyone, but if you can really hone in on your buyer persona, for your marketing and what their desired or their problem state is, yeah, you might lose some sales. You're not going to get everybody. But if you're focused there and on them, those are the people you're going to attract. And that's what conversion rate optimization is about. Start trying to optimize for everyone, because that's where personalization gets into it. And then we get a layer harder is, hey, this person came from this keyword and this person came from this keyword, and we're sending them the same page. What messages can we make that's different that's going to appease both? That gets really hard, and you can run as many tests and multivariate A/B testing. You can get there, but it does add a lot, because then what happens when you change your product or your product page? Then you have to remember. So there is these things as a business owner, you have to remember that, hey, what's good for the customers, but what's also good for the operational side as well.
And what do you do in cases where a brand that you work with, they don't have a PIM system, they're using Shopify as their PIM, they're kind of uploading all their content into Shopify, they're uploading their blog posts, they're uploading all their product content, their images, their video, their PDF download documents, their tables of information, their attributes, their filterable attributes, structured and unstructured data, it's all going directly in the e-commerce platform. But what happens when you encounter a brand that simply does not have very good product data? So that means that, first of all, maybe they don't have much product data at all. Maybe they've got a one-sentence description of their products. Maybe they've got no structured product data that can be faceted or filtered upon. Maybe they have one image instead of 2-3 images, no video. Maybe they've got no specs. If they've got technical products, maybe they've got no specs at all that would allow the customer to make a differentiation for two pumps that look exactly alike, but they got different specs, and I need to be able to filter and differentiate based on spec. I still see a tremendous number of brands that do not, they like to use the term data is the new oil, but then they don't treat it like that. They treat product data as a cost center in the business as opposed to an asset, right? And the brands that treat product data and customer data, for that matter, as an asset. So the brands that treat first-party customer data as a real gold mine and really invest in it heavily in terms of collecting it, organizing it, retaining it, segmenting it, and the brands that really make a massive effort in collecting, aggregating, creating great product content that's very differentiated versus their competitors, it feels like that pays so many dividends beyond just the immediate conversion rate optimization piece. Because obviously Google, the more content it has to index you properly, the more the long tail that you're going to capture of those keyword phrases, and the more traffic is going to be sent to your site, and you're going to have better, more granular landing pages for your paid campaigns as well. And it just feels like content is oftentimes a very overlooked part of experience optimization.
And we just did a test a few weeks ago. One word had an increase of 30%. Just one word, right? Copy can be different, just amazing different. It seems low-hanging fruit. How could one simple word do that? And sometimes we do all these big projects. But I think that's where we have to remember it's conversion rate optimization, not conversion rate perfection. We're going to be optimized. We're never going to hit perfection. But to those companies, to answer your question of, hey, where do we start? Where should they start? Just 1% better each day. What is that 1%? And I think that's where it's really important to have a third party come out and give you that audit and give you that clear view. And then you put the matches together and say, okay, these are our biggest rocks. One of the term is Stephen Covey. Like, what's the big rocks? And then fill in with the sand. But you have to go 1% better. Because if you start going, I've done it, I think almost any entrepreneur is in that business, is you start so many different projects that you're going everywhere fast, but you aren't getting anywhere because you're going in so many different directions. It's really focusing on channeling on that one. So that would be my biggest thing to most people is pick on one, measure it, make a goal, and gradually optimize. Not perfect, optimize. And I think what people forget is Pareto's law. If you get 80% there, customer's going to be happy. Is it really worth that extra 30 hours to get to that extra 10%? Apple's got it figured out. They've also got a big budget, right? But for the average person, if you can just focus, hey, we got an 80% there. Next quarter, we're going to go to another 80%. You'd probably just do just fine.
And when you go in and you first start doing a CRO audit or whatever it might be, are you primarily auditing just what you can see on their website to begin with, or are you also asking them additional questions around their operations, their logistics, their customer service standards, and their processes and the systems they use? What are you primarily focused on when you first engage with a new client that's really wanting to nail conversion and improve that over time?
Always ask them for the data. If I didn't have a good data team, then I wouldn't be there. If I don't know, for going back to that example, if I don't know, let's say they say, hey, can you look at my product page and tell me how I can increase my conversion? If they're not even getting to the product page, what's the point, right? I need to look at your homepage, but I don't have that if I don't have that data. So it's really important to look at both of those things.
Makes sense. And when you work with clients, are you typically saying, look, let's put in place a certain number of tests that we want to run a month, or a certain number of changes we want to make to operations a month? Or are you really saying, look, how do you recommend that these businesses make this a long-term, planned, regimented focus within their business, as opposed to a short-term, oh, look, we want to move from a 3% conversion rate to a 4% average conversion rate across the board, and then when we get there, we'll feel like we've achieved that nirvana that we were looking for, and it's a one-off engagement to get us there, and then we pull the pin and we'll engage you again if it drops. How do we get brands to approach conversion rate optimization, or experience optimization, to probably use a better term nowadays? How do we get them to approach this as a forever optimization plan? This isn't something where it's one and done. This isn't something where we achieve a certain status and we've gotten there. But that's how many brands approach it. It feels like they approach it as a project as opposed to a program of work that will never end. How do we change mindsets of brands to make them focus on the long term here?
It's definitely a culture fit. If there's a client that's just, hey, this is my project and this is where I'm at, and I try and go through an education process of, hey, where do you really want to be? And they don't see this, probably isn't going to be someone I'm going to work with. Now, if I get in there and they're paying a lot of money and you have to do a lot bigger consulting job, it's more about the culture. You have to have, I think that's what Scale Media does very well, is they have that culture of innovation. It's not a one and done. They're always looking for different things. And that's why they succeed in so many tests, is because they have that culture. You have to change that mindset. And that's the hardest part. Sometimes going to new stakeholders and changing that, getting that buy-in in the C-suite can be the hardest part. And so in order to really look at that, you have to really show and have that educational experience and really take that 3,000 level foot view. And it all comes down to, you can say, I think one of the best things I did was sales when it comes to conversion rate optimization, because you learn how to sell to people that aren't in that position. They aren't in the C-suite and they're trying to pitch this as a mindset. You need to optimize your presentation. You need to know your audience of who you're presenting to, because you have to get them on board. And if you've done your effort and you're really good at optimizing things, you should be able to optimize that presentation and get them on board. If you can't, maybe you need to look somewhere else, because there are those people that just aren't going to change, but you have to give it a shot. But it really comes down to that culture.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I find the same thing in B2B. If I have a saying in my business, which is I never try to sell the unsellable. Basically, if I have to convince someone that digital experiences are something that are important in today's world as of 2024, then I'm probably, one of us is in the wrong room, so to speak. And it feels like you're of a very similar mindset, which is, look, there's enough brands that get it, there's enough brands that want to get it, and there's enough brands that don't get it, that I can break those down into three very clear cohorts, and I'm not going to work with the brands that don't get it and don't want to get it. And bury the head in the sand kind of mentality. Listen, Tanner, this has been a fantastic conversation. If people want to get a hold of you, I'll pop your LinkedIn profile into the show notes, and I will also put your website into the show notes. But if people want to get a hold of you and they want to talk further about conversion rate optimization, experience optimization, mindset, empathy, all those things that you're really great at understanding and helping brands wrap their head around, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, right now that would be LinkedIn on my site. I'm going to be starting a newsletter. We've just started a little email newsletter, so then you get it straight to the inbox. Hopefully it's going to be more of that 70% we're listening instead of sending out 90%. And we'll get there as people start putting questions in. But hopefully email or Slack even is a good way.
Fantastic. Listen, now as we come down to the end of our time together, and I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you being a guest mentor for the day for us. Now this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. Mr. Tanner Holt, what is your question for me today?
I think the question you've talked a lot about content curation. What would you say? You've talked about a lot of routine. What's the ideal experience that people should have when they're making their content?
Look, it's an interesting one because I'll differentiate my answer. So if you're a brand and you're selling products, physical products, then I think I think we cannot simply say if you don't like creating content, then you don't create content. I think it's table stakes today to have excellent product content, structured data, unstructured data, images, video. If you're in the B2B world, then you need spec sheets, you need exploded drawings, you need material safety data sheets, you need all sorts of specialized content depending on the vertical you operate in and who your customer is. And you need to be able to give them enough information that they can actually complete their buying decision without reaching out and contacting you for more information. I think that's the minimum standard. Does the customer have all the information they need without having to contact you to make an informed buying decision? That's the minimum standard. Now, obviously, if you are a content creator like me and you have to build your personal brand even before you can build your professional brand, then obviously you have to create the content that you can do consistently. So if you're a writer, then make written content. If that's what you enjoy the most and you can do the most consistently at scale, then write a blog or put out lots of content on LinkedIn, etc. If you love being on video, then heck, make a vlog or make a blog that has embedded video in it, etc., etc. If you like being on social media and you like pictures with some long form written content or some short form written content, then do that. So I would say that really it mostly comes down to what can you do consistently at scale without getting bored, without giving up. And I had to think about that with the podcast. I had to think to myself and I had to be honest with myself. I had to say, can I do this for the long term? Because I knew the statistics about pod fade. I knew the fact that something like 95% of podcasts never get past episode 20. And I was like, can I do this for the long term? And I started out just with audio, and I thought that would make it a little bit easier. But what I discovered after a couple hundred episodes of pure audio was that the whole entire world was shifting to short form video. And I was like, turning an audio only podcast into some short form video promotional clips for TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts, that's really difficult. So I was like, okay, I'm going to need to up my game. I'm going to need to now do a full video of each one of my episodes so that I can still distribute the audio, but I can also distribute the full length video on platforms like YouTube. And then that gives me a foundation to slice and dice into short clips using Opus Clip, which is what I use to create the short clips. That gives me a foundation, a base that I can chop up and repurpose in multiple different ways. And then through the use of Write Blogger, I can convert using AI, I can convert my long form video into blog articles of that exact same content with the video embedded in the base of the blog article if they want to see the original full long form video. So that's a long-winded way to say that I think if you're selling physical products, I think there is such a high expectation. There's such a high minimum standard today around product content that if you aren't doing the product content, your competitors will be. And so basically, if you can't or won't or refuse to make the investment in great product content, you might as well shut down your store because you're never going to win without amazing product content at scale. And then in terms of personal brand, I think you got to focus on the content that you can do consistently and actually, because you got to enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy doing it, man, that is going to show. So I think it's like this video, right? If I hated being on camera and I hated the sound of my own voice, I think it would be pretty bloody obvious to my audience that was the case, right? But clearly I like the sound of my own voice, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. And I think you just have to go with what you're passionate about, what you can do consistently, and then slowly over time I think you can tiptoe outside of those bounds, outside of the comfort zone, and you can dabble just at the fringes of your comfort zone to expand that comfort zone over time. Because some people, what I find, some people when they first start creating audio content, they're really self-conscious. Then they get comfortable with audio content. And then they go, oh, now that I'm comfortable with audio content, I'm going to dabble in some short form video and I'm going to see if I like that. Oh, that doesn't feel quite right. Okay, well, I'll keep dabbling. And then they eventually desensitize themselves to seeing their face on video, and they can expand their comfort zone slowly over time. So that would be my two different approaches to content depending on where you're at.
Yeah, no, it sounds like that 1% getting used to trying new things.
Always got to get outside your comfort zone. I reckon that's where the sauce, that's where the juice is worth the squeeze.
There you go.
Listen, Tanner, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.